Welcome back, everyone, for this wonderful Bills victory day. You are joining Greg Thompson and his co-host, Aaron Quinn, for the Cover One Buffalo podcast. Aaron, are you still alive?
I am, dude. We were talking about whether or not we were going to do this show at our normal. Last season we did it at pretty much 7:00 because we were on a different platform and giving people a chance to catch up. And then this year we were kind of hemming and hawing, going back and forth. And as the game was wrapping up, Greg and I are writing each other. And even with the 19 seconds left, I was like, well, wait a minute, let's see, because I might be dead if this game goes the other way. But holy cow, man! What a day! What a up and down series of emotions. And I'm glad to be joining you, though, here with a victory. It feels much nicer to come in and do the show after winning that game.
Yeah, no, I was texting with my dad and said that my heart rate was unsustainable and that they may have to come find me in the basement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It also doesn't help that we eat terrible food and drink on game day. That probably doesn't help them.
Yeah, it's not ideal. Not ideal. So before we jump right in, make sure you guys are checking out cover1.net. We already have 4 takeaways coming from Fernando. Awesome coverage from Rob. Amazing in the premium channel Slack. Today is the absolute money's worth day that you find out why we have this subscription process and to be able to join as a member. And Aaron, tell everybody a little bit about it. I know we kind of hid in there from Twitter for most of the day.
Yeah, so I pretty much stayed off Twitter because my game day Twitter experience is never really pleasant. Just the amount of overreactions, you can't really stop and filter people that you like and follow from reacting. But the Cover One Slack channel is really one of my favorite places, and it extended past game day this week, just ramping up. Even last night, it was super active, as obviously we're all excited. It's like Christmas Eve for us football fans, so we're all just excited, interacting, engaging on there. We started a DraftKings fantasy league on there. You guys have a bunch of fantasy leagues going, so it's really become a really big group of friends and almost that family atmosphere there. And while we disagree at times and have fun interactive arguments, it's never out of control like it can be on Twitter or any of those. So it's a really nice place to go talk Bills with like-minded people who are looking to learn the game. And obviously that's why we're involved in Cover One and why everybody's here with Cover One is to learn the game. And so to that aspect, the Slack channel, Eric is in there posting. We have a film Slack room in there, and he's always there posting breakdowns kind of in throughout the game. When we're overreacting, he's like, well, this is actually what happened, guys, calm it down, you know what I mean? So it's a lot of fun, and I recommend, if you haven't gotten into the Slack and the premium membership yet, do it. It really makes the game day experience better and just leading up to the game that much better, at least for me. It just gives me a group of people to interact with, so I don't have to bug my wife all week.
No, and I think you and Eric both touched on it. We kind of thanked everyone to really appreciate how much, it's become family and friends. Really, it's a great community. So let's dive right in. It was a pretty, bipolar game here, Aaron. We were trying to calm everyone down early that a lot of the turnovers were fluky, but when you get to that point where you have 4 turnovers, man, that's tough. And I think that each of them in a vacuum, you can kind of explain, understand how they happened, why they weren't this person's fault or that person's fault. But, how are you feeling when we're at 4 turnovers to none and, kind of staring that in the face?
Well, I was super conflicted because obviously we were talking about it here right before we went live. That first drive, the way the Bills came out, they came out firing, passing, and that was really opposite of everything I thought they were building this offseason. I thought they were really building to kind of control the ball and play a defensive game, but they really came out, put Allen in shotgun, spread stuff out, and he was picking them apart on that first drive. And I was like, holy cow, like this is a very different offense. Definitely what people talked about on Twitter and expecting, but we were seeing it kind of come to fruition. And then you have the kind of sloppy fumble turnover, and you're kind of like, all right. They come back, they're moving the ball again, and then you get another turn. Well, actually, the second turnover happened pretty quickly, but they continued to move the ball, and that was really where I was conflicted. Was you have a couple kind of freaky turnovers, the one that bounces off Beasley's leg. I know there was some argument over whose fault that was. I don't really care. It ended up in 6. So I was conflicted during this whole game of, man, Josh Allen looks like he's actually playing pretty good, but you got these 4 turnovers. And obviously that's unacceptable. And 99% of the time your team doesn't win in that circumstance, especially on the road. Luckily we ended up pulling out the victory, so those turnovers aren't going to be as big of a story here throughout the week. But it is something that I'm going to keep a close eye on and hope that we can just have those be flukes in a really fluky game and move forward this year and just have normal year 2 mistakes and not be a thing. We don't want Josh Allen to become a turnover machine, because that's just going to stress the defense too much. And then my 11-5 prediction will totally go out the window.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting to see. You want to be able to be realistic. You want to be able to look at, takeaways from the game, and I thought that there were definite steps forward from Josh Allen. There were some good plays. I thought his footwork in the pocket was really nice. I thought the fact that he was taking what was there was really nice. But he's never going to be this flawless passer that every single one is on the money. So you're always just hoping for more good than bad. When you have that combo where you're getting some bad luck and some throws that weren't perfect. So you can argue Beasley should have caught that because it was on his back hip and he could have got his hands on it, but it wasn't a great pass. And the same thing, on the other tip balls, like it's not ideal, and it's explainable that he wasn't having a ton of chemistry with Mitch Morris and they had the botch snap. So it's understandable you're in those positions, but it's still not great. So having the combination where we did see legitimate steps forward and then somehow survived a 4 turnover game. I spent all last year talking about that recipe for victory, and a negative 4 turnover differential is insane.
Yeah,
to actually pull away with a win.
It is. And one thing that I think is pretty fair to talk about this week, I liked the way they looked coming out, driving the ball down the field. When we got to halftime, it was a 23-3 pass to run ratio. And I don't think that that's a path to success for the Bills. We've talked about a lot in the Slack channel of, these wide receivers aren't going to have 70 receptions, 100 reception guys. But if they played the offense that they played in the first half, they will do that. And I think that they balanced it out in the second half, and that helped bring the comeback. Obviously, Mosley's injury helped being able to run the ball a little bit more. But I don't think that they can continue week in and week out to have a game plan where the run-pass ratio is 23-3. I think they really got to balance it out more. I'm fine with it. It is a passing league. I get it. Josh is a playmaker. Obviously, John Brown, wide receiver 1, is a playmaker. So I'm fine with it being 60-40 or 70-30, but not the ratio that we saw in that first half. And I think that led to a lot of the pressure and the spiraling out of control of maybe some of those turnovers too, as we were putting too much pressure on Josh. And while passing game leads to more chances to make big plays, I do agree with the analytics guys on that. It also does lead to the chance to have more big turnovers, right? Like, you're putting the ball in the air. There's more errors that can happen when the ball's in the air. And Josh Allen's just not that guy yet. I don't think he's ready to lead this team to 10, 11 victories with his arm alone.
And I think the rough part was the combination of things didn't net out for the total. I think the plan was to tire them out, to run no huddle, to get a lot of plays out there, to hopefully get a little bit of a lead, then let your defense pin their ears back and let the running game take over in the second half because they're tired and because you ran more plays than them. Well, then when you have 4 turnovers, you give them free points, and then you start the second half with a long drive and then compound that with a 1-play safety drive, and then they get another drive. That combination was just impossible to be able to kind of get away from. So at that point, you've now set up for this idea that, we're going to tire out the defense, and then you give them literally like an hour without having to come onto the field for more than 1 play, and you've now negated everything that you actually legitimately stacked up in the first half to be able to go live there. It's tough to be able to put that together. So I think that there were certainly some things in the game plan that you can question going back, but I think it was sound with how it was working at first, and then just you can't plan for 4 turnovers. And some guys in the chat even talked about the safety might as well be a plus turnover because you give them points and the ball. So it's really a 5th turnover plus the 2 points. So let's kind of take a look at when you talk about that breakdown of the ratio between the run and the pass. There certainly were a couple flashes here, and I know you were awful excited in the chat about one particular running back.
Yeah, well, and I am. Devin Singletary on only 4 carries, 70 yards, 17.5 yards per carry. Clearly, he's not going to have games like that all the time. That would be fantastic. But I think some of it was a little bit of Mosley being out, like we've talked about. I think that opened up some of the stuff. He was playing fantastic, and we've been pretty critical of that pickup for the Jets as far as the pay, how much they paid him. When the season starts, it doesn't matter how much the guy's getting paid. If he's producing, and he was for the Jets, he was probably one of their biggest playmakers of the game. If they win that game, I think C.J. Mosley is probably the player of the game for that team outside of Le'Veon Bell. So big acquisition for him. When he goes out, I think it opened up the run game a little bit. But there was a huge difference in the way Frank Gore was running on his 11 carries versus what Devin Singletary was able to do in just his 4 carries. So I'm hoping that he gets a little bit more as they increase that ratio here, ramping up, moving forward, and some more ability to get some touches. He dropped one catch out of the backfield, and he almost dropped another. So I want to see those hands more consistent like we saw in the preseason. If he can put that all together and be a really big package here, he can really make me personally, a guy that was upset about the Shady deal. He can make me start to forget about Shady because he was shifty. He showed some of that. You've talked about it a lot after we settled down from the draft, that he's faster than his testing looked. He showed that in a couple of these bigger plays. So I'm excited, man. He fits in the NFL, and I think that he's a guy that's a legitimate weapon at this level.
Absolutely. And I've been kind of searching while we're talking here. In the past decade, there have been 5 teams that won with a -4 turnover differential. And being able to pull out a win in a game where really we probably had 5, if you count the safety, that -4 turnover differential to pull out a win is the first one since 2015. And that 2015 was the only one in the past 7 years. Yeah. So being able to have that kind of resilience, that kind of toughness to stay focused, not to let the game get away from you. That was my biggest takeaway. Was this was the kind of game that in years past would have absolutely been one of those, here we go again, there it goes, same old Bills. And that you just kind of let that unravel and you let that go where it's just, it kind of gets away from you and you assume that, well, I guess we'll try to get them again next week. And the fact that they didn't do that, that they stay buckled in, that they stay focused on what they were able to do, control what you can do. And we'll get to the defense here in a bit after finishing the offense. But just keeping in that mindset is just incredible to be able to stay focused on that.
And to that point, I think, one, it goes back to the whole culture conversation. I think they've worked really hard to put the right coaches in place, right leadership in place, because you got a lot of young guys. You got 2 captains that are in their second year. And in a game like that, they haven't experienced a lot of that. And last year, we didn't have a lot of games like this close with all the optimism surrounding the team going into this. That could unravel really quickly, but everybody kind of kept with it. I think that's a part of the leadership of this team, the leadership of the coaching staff, and just trusting in, if you guys keep going, keep grinding, keep doing your job, we can get back in this. We can win this game. And so I think it goes a lot back to culture. And for me, I think taking that away from this game, that Josh Allen didn't come out in the second half and press. He didn't do too much to try to force that game back in. And that would have been a real big opportunity for Josh Allen to go revert back to the hero ball, trying to do too much to get the team back, making up for the turnovers. You didn't see that. They really stayed with the plan. Nobody unraveled. And I think that's a really good sign as we go later into the year and the games get harder and, we get into some more pressure situations. It's situations like this early that you can build off of and create a nice foundation to say, you know what, when stuff hits the fan and we're in a real big battle, we're going to rely on our young talent to not cave.
Absolutely. I mean, you already touched on it, so I was saving this for the end, but I thought that the coaching was great today. I thought the fact that they, like you said, not only did they keep them focused, but I thought the timeout usage was good. No bad challenges, the decisions on when you're going for it, when you're punting, when you're kicking, those kind of things. I thought that consistently McDermott kept everyone's focus, was able to keep it going. You saw him get, really frustrated with some of those different scenarios with the refs and the situation we're putting ourselves in, but not letting the team get away from themselves, not letting them unravel, and then managing the pieces he had control of with, again, the clock management, the challenge usage, I thought was incredible. So just seeing that was something he struggled with a little bit in the past. It's only one game, but they've talked a lot about using analytics. They have a guy on the sideline that his job is to run the math, or maybe in the booth in his ear, that he's constantly running the math on those things. And that, whether you're getting good feedback on when to challenge a play, whether you're getting good feedback on when to hold off on a timeout or when it's okay to use them at the end of the half, that, hey, if you get in a certain defensive look or something like that, there are critical moments to use that. But we had no frivolous timeouts. No, hey, we got to save this, delay a game timeout. I hate those. So being in those situations where the timing mattered makes sense. I
think we did have one. I'll have to go back and look.
It was at the very end. It was at the end.
It was at the and it was a smart call. In the past, we haven't hit that. But I think you're right. It stood out to me too as I was watching the game that They managed things well. That at the end of the game, that was a little wonky. That was more circumstance of when they got the ball, having to punt back to them. That kind of thing is going to happen. I don't think that was on the coaches. That was just kind of the circumstance of not being able to convert a first down.
Yeah, you're not gonna. Your alternative was calling passes, and
Yeah.
obviously, I prefer the actual dedication to running the ball to get the clock running, make them use their timeouts.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that stood out for coaching to me, too, was that you saw really. We didn't get the ball much in the third quarter, but you saw the transition back to the run, moving the ball that way. I thought that was a good way to transition from how we started the game. It showed that they're changing mid-game, which is something we haven't seen Buffalo a lot lately. But then also how they were able to take Bell out, really, those last few drives, because Bell was starting to really warm up. He was starting to kill him. Milano really stepped it up in those last couple drives. I don't know what they did schematically. That's where I would lean to Eric on over the next week here to show me what they did schematically. But they really eliminated Bell from the end of that game, who was really probably the guy that was moving the chains most from the outside of Crowder. Crowder still got his, but they did a good job adjusting throughout the game, I guess. And you need that in this league. And that's something that's haunted the Bills for 17 years, is not having the ability to adjust while you're watching other teams do it each and every week.
Absolutely, and I think that let's move into the receivers here with
yeah,
the
you do want
to. So obviously Beasley looked good early, got 5 catches very quickly, and then had a couple targets, but they couldn't quite get on the same page with Josh late. I think that most of those were on Josh. There was a couple where Beasley read the safety, went one way, didn't go the other way. But John Brown looked fantastic. 10 targets, 7 catches for 123 yards and a touchdown. Made a couple nice plays on comebackers. A lot of really good crossing routes. I talked all off season about how his deep speed will frighten cornerbacks, and he'll end up getting those free 15-yard outs because the corner drops off so far. He had 2 of those that Tremaine Johnson was terrified and just gave him absolutely free 15-yard catches. And then obviously makes a play for the game-winning touchdown there. And just, I think that he's not ever going to be your stereotypical wide receiver one. He's never going to be your Julio Jones kind of guy. But I think he's a legitimate offensive threat, and I think his speed matters. And I'm excited to see how that chemistry can grow.
Yeah, he was the best player on the offensive side of the ball for the Bills today, outside of Devin Singletary's 4 carries. But no, Brown was by far the best player. And I think a new nickname for him would be Chunk, because he just picks up yards in chunks. He really does. I think his least was an 11-yard gain. So every time he's touching the ball, it was a first down. And he was just picking them up 15 yards, 20-something yards. That's something we haven't had here as well in a while. So to have him to be able to make some of those chunk plays when you're in a 3rd and long or even a 2nd and long and just want to, keep the ball moving and keep getting first downs. If he can do that, man, it's going to be pretty scary for the Bills offense. Beasley was a guy I was up and down on today. And we'll get to who is our up and down players for the overall game, but he's a guy that I really consider just because, he started out really early. I expected more out of him and more receptions in this offense, just more targets. And then I honestly put the interception, the pick 6 on Beasley. I'll have that argument with anyone on Twitter. But then he had another drop, and that was a tough catch. The one Allen just laid in a bucket with
he had a nice little touch
accuracy. It's definitely a tough catch. I'll give him that, but that thing hit him where he could have caught it. And that was a big play at a big part of the game. And you pay that guy and you bring in a vet like that to make tough catches. So I expect him to make that. And maybe my expectations of Cole are too high, but that kind of pumped the brakes for myself a little bit on Cole Beasley.
Yeah, I think it's early. I think that seeing them, they did have some positive things early on. He did trust him, was kind of that safety valve, and I think there's plenty of good things to come. But yeah, it was maybe started a little hotter than it finished. We saw a couple flashes from the tight ends here. Tommy Sweeney looked good. I noticed Lee Smith several times finishing blocks way after the whistle. That is an angry man blocking, and I'm totally fine with that, even if he is basically an offensive tackle. But I thought that the combination of Knox, Sweeney, and Lee Smith survived the game.
Yep.
And then the offensive line, I thought that Josh had his time. I think that there were several exotic blitzes that they picked up. I thought that Josh was able to roll out. You saw obviously the nasty speed rush that Jenkins got Dawkins on early, but Dawkins didn't let that spiral out of control and become a bad game. He did give up a bad pass rush. It did cost us the ball there, but being able to kind of regroup, I thought the offensive line for their first game playing all together was halfway decent. And I want to see the snap count of who had more, but I certainly noticed Nsekhe out there fairly equal to Cody Ford. So I'm kind of curious how that nets out in the final snap count.
Yeah, and I can't wait to see breakdowns on the offensive line play and that rotation, because that's really something I'm keeping my eye on moving forward here. I don't love rotating that all the time, so I hope that that's something that they can solidify here in the first 4 weeks of the season and figure out who that right tackle is going to be. I agree with you that the offensive line performed well and that there were some really nice blitz pickups. I think Josh, especially early, was doing a good job when we were in the no huddle of signaling to the offensive line, pressure assignments, things like that. I thought he was doing a really good job controlling the offense. I do think a little bit of it was by design of the defense trying to keep Josh in the pocket. We heard all week that they were going to try to make him a passer. So I think some of the pockets that I saw were also a part of the defensive game plan of here's your pocket, stay in it. We want that, stay in there and try to make the throw because we don't think you can beat us that way. And part of it backfired for the Jets, but then they got the turnover, so they end up looking pretty smart. And Josh Allen didn't really chew him up with his arm, but the guy still had a 65% completion percentage game. So I don't know that a lot of teams are going to be able to take that game plan moving forward and say we're going to make Josh Allen beat us with his arm, because I don't think he's going to turn the ball over 4 times a game for the rest of the year. And if he's not turning the ball over and you're continuing those drives, this is a totally different game.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one final point on the offensive line, I think Ron brought it up in the chat. I'm curious if Feliciano did enough to hold off the switch of Cody Ford to guard and Nsekhe in at right tackle.
That's a good point.
He had some good plays, but he also had a couple boneheaded penalties. And I'm curious. That's going to be curious to see that now that everybody seemed to get through this game healthy. And I will say we haven't heard on Taron Johnson's hamstring. That was the only injury that I had heard of during the game. Right. So he was out at one point, but nickel corner is one where we have a little bit of depth. So we'll see where that goes. I'm curious to see where that goes in the second half. But let's switch over here and talk about what was an incredible performance from start to finish. Besides one drive in the game, I think the Bills' defense dominated the Jets and really stepped up over and over and over again. What were your overall impressions of the defense?
Elite. I mean, there really is no other way around how to put that. I think the Jets offense, I think a lot of people are sleeping on the amount of weapons that the Jets offense had. And I think rightfully so, nobody knew what to expect out of Le'Veon Bell. They mentioned it however many times in the game. It's been 600 days since he's played football. No one really knew what to expect, but we all knew he was a talented player and that if Gase is as smart as people proclaim him to be, he was going to utilize him in this game, and we saw it. They did. And I thought that this defense did a good job of handling a lot of the weapons. There's a lot of weapons. Darnold's a good quarterback. Even on plays that they weren't able to get pressure to him, you had the coverage was there. We saw a couple coverage sacks. We saw just pressure being dialed up. There was a big third down play, and I was in the Slack channel and said, this is where Jerry Hughes earns his money. And to me, I feel like the really elite defenses, when you have a guy third and long, you're making big plays, and we saw that out of the Bills. They were making big plays when you have them against the ropes. I think this defense really has the ability to take a big step forward this year, which is crazy to think because of how good they were last year. But again, I don't think the Ford turnover thing is going to be a regular occurrence throughout the year. If the offense plays a little better and doesn't have the defense out there so often, their stats at the end of the year could be unbelievable, what they're able to keep opponents to.
Yeah, and I mean, if you step back and look at this, we gave up 223 total yards.
Mm-hmm.
Bills held them to 155 passing yards, 68 rushing yards with 4 sacks. We technically did get credited with a turnover and a fumble recovery on that last play of the game when they're running the crazy lateral play.
Right.
Trent Murphy fell on it at the end, so they did credit us with 1 turnover technically.
Hooray!
Yeah. But I will say, and it's come up in the chat several times here as well, that the turnover luck was very negative here, and that we had several fluky plays that went their way. We had several plays on our side that were tipped balls up in the air that last year those were picks, and that we didn't get any of those. So the fact that we pulled that out with a dominant defensive performance, holding them to 3.4 yards a play, 3.4 yards per pass, as well as 3.2 yards per rush. So there were several plays where Le'Veon Bell broke tackles and looked good. He performed well, but as a whole, if you told me going in that we were going to hold him to 60 yards on 17 carries and under 100 total yards, I would have taken that. So it's something that I think really spoke to the performance of the defense, consistently staying in it, being out there and asked a lot. That third quarter was unbelievably taxing with 2 long drives, only separated by 1 offensive snap and being able to be in that position. I thought that they moved Sam Darnold off his spot several times. I thought that they pressured him and that, it may not show up, although 4 sacks is really good. There was a ton of pressure and a ton of quarterback hits, 9 total quarterback hits, as well as several additional pressures. So the idea that we weren't 100% sure, we were hoping that last year wasn't fluky and that the defense really was what we were hoping. I thought coming into this game, they performed incredibly well. So I certainly was happy. How about on the defensive line? Let's start a little bit in detail there.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on the D-line?
Well, I want to address one thing. I think, the turnover stuff was a little fluky, lucky stuff going their way. We lucked out a number of times that didn't result in turnovers, but there was, I think, Levi Wallace on one play, it got it past deflection, but he was actually lost. He was just kind of running around lost, and it was an underthrown ball.
Oh, he was toasted.
Yeah, he was just toasted. And then he got toasted again. I think it was him. I'll have to go back and look. Anderson got wide open over the top, and it was a safety, and I think Levi Wallace chasing him, and Darnold just missed him by like 2 yards. And that would have been a big-time touchdown and would have won the game. I think it was late fourth quarter. So we got a little lucky on a couple bounces too, but you need that in this league. I've talked about that for years. You have to have 4 to 6 plays every game where whoever gets the luckiest on those plays ends up winning. So no problems there. Along the defensive line, I saw a lot of things that I liked. One thing that I saw that I really liked was Shaq Lawson's effort. Okay. Every time he was in, he showed a lot of effort. He doesn't have a lot of moves still, but he showed a little bit more than I've seen in the past. That's always been my big complaint with him. He was trying some new stuff, making some moves on guys, but his effort was there. And if you give me a guy that's a rotational guy that is just giving effort on every play, I can live with less finesse moves or things like that. I just want guys that are going to go out there and play hard. I think the guy maybe that I have to go back and watch, but I was a little disappointed because I've been pounding the table for him, was Trent Murphy. He did have one deflected ball, but I didn't see a lot of pressure being created by Trent Murphy, and I was hoping to see a little bit more. Obviously, it's early. I'm not going to make a judgment on him, but those were probably my I was most impressed with Shaq Lawson and probably least impressed with Trent Murphy. And if you had asked me a week ago, I would have swapped those.
Yeah, and I think that there's a combination there with the same idea for Ed Oliver. I would have liked to have seen him finish that one that he got to the quarterback on, but he pushed the pocket several times.
Big time, yeah.
And I think the same thing. I think Trent Murphy was able to get some kind of pocket impact and impacted the quarterback, but it wasn't his best game for what I was hoping he would maybe clean up some of those things. So I thought that the overall combination of the defensive line looked good. The rotation was good. Jordan Phillips kind of got a fluky roughing the quarterback because he fell into Darnold's knees late. That I hate those. But overall, I saw him flash several times. He almost stopped Le'Veon Bell.
Oh my God, dude!
Where he got him, but let him get it by an inch.
I was up out of my seat, pumping my hands. My baby's sleeping upstairs, so I'm like fake yelling. I'm like, ah. And then I was like, wait, they still have how's that possible? And I watched the replay, but he had him stuffed. That would have been a huge play. Luckily, we still won the game, but great penetration there by Phillips. Just you lose some of those sometimes.
Yeah, and so moving into the second layer here, I thought that the linebackers were okay. I thought that the task of covering the guys like Le'Veon Bell and Jamison Crowder is a lot to ask. I thought that they were really good in run support. I thought that there was a couple communications issues. There was one that certainly Trey White and Milano led up an easy third down that they just didn't communicate, and down towards the goal line on their touchdown drive, Le'Veon Bell ran kind of a little out route that ended up turning into kind of a wheel route around the other receiver, and that was something that certainly was avoidable. So I thought that Milano and Edmonds flashed when they needed. I thought that Tremaine had a couple nice plays. Milano did have a tackle for a loss and a couple quarterback hits, but I thought that it was an okay game for the linebacker, probably speaking more to how high my expectations are of those guys, but I thought it was an okay game at the linebacker level.
Yeah, I think it was fine. Edmonds flashed a couple times. He made some nice plays. I think the thing that I liked best about the linebackers was they were doing some interesting things, the Jets were, of moving Le'Veon Bell and even Ty Montgomery, who didn't get a lot of touches, but they were moving those guys around in unique ways, more modern offensive ways. It's hard for some of these linebackers to cover when you got a guy swinging, coming from the opposite side and swinging out back around the quarterback. That's hard to cover. There's a lot of space on those routes to cover, and the linebackers did a good job getting there, and they did a pretty good job tackling too. Guys are still getting yards. They were getting 3-4 yards, but they weren't getting beat on the first tackle, especially Edmonds. And Milano had a couple nice hits. Milano dialed up a couple really nice pressures. One of his pressures led to that Jerry Hughes sack on third down. He definitely made Darnold move in the pocket and created that opportunity for Jerry to clean it up. So there were some nice things that we saw. We saw Lorenzo Alexander had a couple nice, more hustle plays that you expect to see out of Lorenzo Alexander. He's never going to give up on a play, so you saw some of that from him. So overall, I was fine. I didn't see – there was a couple, like you said, communication errors, but nothing that stood out to me glaring, feeling frustrated about year 2 progress for Edmonds or anything like that. I think they handled it well. It was a tough matchup, some tough assignments for them, and I think they came out ultimately on top and didn't make any major mistakes.
No, I agree. And I think that it really spoke to what the plan of the defense is, which is what you saw with the secondary, in that games like this where you see 14 catches for Jamison Crowder, but 14 catches that none of them were over 20 yards.
And they didn't break it afterwards.
Everything was kept in front of them. They didn't have a single play over 20 yards. They didn't have a 20-yard play. Everything was in front of them. Everything was, that's fine. You can make the catch. Then we're going to tackle you. We're going to come up. We're going to stay disciplined. There was one play where if, I think you touched on earlier to Levi, that if Darnold was able to get a little bit better throw, Robbie Anderson had him toasted. But other than that, Anderson had 3 catches for 23 yards. He wasn't doing anything, incredible. I thought that they kept everything there, and that's what the shell of that defense is. It's going to be that kind of bend but don't break, and we're going to hope that the defensive line can bring pressure, that they're able to do the right things, and that our back 7 is going to hold up. And that, obviously I hope that nothing's wrong with Terran's hamstring, long term, but they're prepared for that. They have some depth. They have some guys that they can move around, and having the versatility with the safeties, with the different guys that you can play, I think really shows what the strength of this defense is. And being able to hold, some talented guys, Robbie Anderson and Quincy Enunwa and Jamison Crowder are no joke, and being able to hold that passing offense to 157 yards, I think is pretty great to start the year. So I was, besides a couple plays where I do think Levi Wallace got a little bit fortunate on both of his pass breakups, were probably underthrows that he got lucky coming back to be able to break up. But that's the way the ball bounces, and he certainly got that good fortune. I thought overall the rest of the secondary was phenomenal, and I kind of thought that Trey White got the Deion Sanders treatment today, and that the reason that we barely saw anything show up in the stat box or anything during the game is that they just didn't dare go at him.
I think he gave up one catch early on to Enunwa, maybe. And I didn't really see much else after that. I'll have to go back and watch. But, he didn't get thrown to a lot. I thought Poyer really stood out to me. He was all over the ball. He made a couple really nice plays in run support. He was just up there blasting through the line. So Jordan Poyer is a guy I really think he's got a chip on his shoulder. And I think that he's in for a big season here. He just always seems to be around the ball, and that's what you need out of a safety. So I loved what they did. Levi, a couple times there was some opportunities for the Jets to take advantage of that, and we lucked out on that. He did make a really nice play. It was a 3rd and long. He made a really nice play on that ball. Anderson ended up catching it, but Levi came in to cut it off. It didn't end up converting. It was a nice play, and sometimes those happen where the guy still catches it, but you made a nice play on the ball. And it's a negative play on you as a defender, but that was encouraging to see him break on the ball like that. And he's going to probably get a couple of those are going to go his way versus the receiver's way. So that was nice to see. Obviously, I see in the comments here, Ron says, Ron Beck, one of our great Slack members and always big supporter, talks about Taron Johnson and durability issues. I don't know that we can go there yet. It's not like he re-injured his shoulder or did something hitting somebody. Hamstrings are going to happen here in this first week. And actually the Bills are incredibly lucky to walk away from this game that Taron Johnson's the only guy to get hurt. And now we're seeing reporting Taron Johnson's told hamstring popped at MRI Mountain Day. Obviously, that's not great news, but out of all the positions, like you said, that's something that they're deep on, and I think actually deep enough into the practice squad where they can feel comfortable bringing guys in. And there's guys out there on the street that are used to playing in this system that can come right back in.
One of them that, even beyond that, one of them that was on this roster and is recovering himself.
Yeah,
so
EJ Gaines. I would love that.
Or Captain Munderland. So
yeah,
I mean, you can bring in a nickel guy, right there that you could bring in. You can promote Cam Lewis. You could re-sign Lafayette Pitts. You could re-sign Captain Munderland, and you can wait probably 3 more weeks. I think that my rough estimate by how most injury settlements work was going to be after week 4. You were eligible
EJ Gaines.
on EJ Gaines. So depending on his health, you're able to do that. that, but we have plenty of options there. That, don't get me wrong, I prefer
Taron Johnson's a different guy. He
healthy.
makes our defense better. Yeah.
Yes, but that's survivable with the versatility of Saran Neal, with the versatility of Kurt Coleman. You bring back a guy like Captain Munnerlyn, a guy like EJ Gaines, a guy like Cam Lewis. That's very survivable with our backfield and the way the defense D-backs have been set up, and really speaks to what the team and Bean and Joe Shane and Dan Morgan are able to put together there with the depth of that secondary.
Saran Neal's taken a big step here in the last 6 months in getting reps, and you're seeing that in how the team trusts in him. Obviously, he's still got flaws, and he's definitely not Taron Johnson yet, but I feel pretty confident that they can hide him in the defense and make it so that he's not a glaring flaw, right? That he can just get picked on all game. I think that they'll be able to do that and hopefully ride the wave of a not long injury from Taron Johnson, hopefully.
Absolutely. Let's kind of close this out with some of our special teams, and we'll do our players of the game. I thought that Hauschka looked good, made that kick with ease, looked clean on the extra points. One was maybe a little more narrow than I would like. I don't love Micah Hyde being back there on punt returns, but he catches the ball every
smooth dude,
even with a Pete Rose baseball slide.
Yeah, he'd be a great center fielder, man. He's a smooth guy.
And honestly, Bajorquez was pretty good. His first punt was his best punt as a Bill. It was amazing hang time to the point that he let Saran Neal get down there and literally fair catch the ball, standing there waiting for it to come down. So that kind of, hang time and making that possible is fantastic. Then the next one, he comes out and he crushes it 60 yards. So it technically ended up bouncing into the end zone because but
that was a coverage thing.
The punt return guy kind of faked to catch it, then screened off the guy, and it took a sharp bounce. Otherwise, that could have been down for a probably 56, 57-yard one down at the 3-yard line.
Yep.
And then at the end of the game, you're asking a lot. He's punting from like the 38-yard line. That's kind of tough to pin it deep. I would have liked to have seen that one, but 2 out of 3 was pretty good. For as rough as his start is, I think he probably earned himself another week to be able to keep going here. And I think, honestly, it's not crazy to think his leash is short enough that it's a week-to-week thing unless he stacks together 4, 5, 6 of them.
Right.
But he earned another week in my book that I don't think we have to go out and find another guy. I think that he did okay with that.
Yeah, special teams didn't lose this game, and that's a huge improvement from a year ago. Because a game this close, you pile on top of 4 turnovers and sloppy offense, you pile on one special teams mistake, and that just tips the scales over the top, and we didn't see any mistakes. The thing that stood out to me, I'll have to go back. I don't think there was any special teams penalties.
I was just going to say that. I was looking. I don't think so either.
And that, I can't remember the last time I saw a game where they don't come out there and say half the distance to the goal, on the Bills and push our offense back. It just happens all the time. And so that's something that I'm really excited to look at moving forward. I think you're right. I think Bojorquez keeps his position for another week. I would like to see him progress into that guy. I know you said that's a hard kick at the end of the game. I would like to see him kind of make those finesse kicks a little bit more versus we know he's got the power leg and he can let it rip and he can create some hang time. I want to see him be able to really pin somebody in that situation because that makes it totally different. You pin him in the 10-yard line or something like that in that situation and you feel a lot more comfortable.
Look at on the other side.
Their punter
he was
almost won the game for him.
Yeah, he literally was responsible for that safety. I'll give credit to our friend Kevin Massari. He made that call that that punter was responsible for those 2 points. I mean, he literally put them in that position. And, shame on us for letting it happen, but that was 2 points from the punter.
Yeah.
Looking at the penalties, I don't see any that were on special teams. I saw 2 that were from Feliciano, so that's a shame to be in that position. But it was spread out fairly even. We had 7 of them, 4 on offense, 3 on defense. A couple false starts that I thought were there, and a couple ticky-tack ones, especially the roughing the passer by Jordan Phillips. That was very ticky-tack and falling into his knees. But overall, pretty good discipline game. Didn't let up a lot of anything crazy.
Which is crazy because week 1, I feel like there's a ton of flags in a lot of these games. I didn't get to watch any of the games yet, but you see it. We saw it a lot on the first game of the year. You see a lot of flags. So good sign for the Bills. Seems like they're playing a little bit more disciplined football going into this year. And again, it stood out for me most on special teams. I'm a guy that just cannot stand special teams mistakes and penalties. It drives me absolutely nuts.
So who was your we'll do offensive and defensive players of the game. Who would you say was the offensive player of the game?
John Brown.
I
don't even think it's close.
Yeah, I think it's fair to give an honorable mention to Devin Singletary, but I agree. I think that Brown really stood out.
Yeah, no, I love what we saw from Brown, and I hope that he can build on that going forward this year. I think that he creates a legitimate guy that defenses are really going to have to. That's going to be the guy when defenses start to build their game plans about this new Buffalo Bills offense. That's where they're going to start to try to take away from, because we saw the Jets said, "Hey, we're going to take away Josh Allen," and that's fine, and it did work in the sense that they created those turnovers. But I don't know that that was a product of the game plan as much as it was just sloppy, fluky plays. I don't think the game plan worked that well, because Josh Allen actually threw the ball really efficiently, found guys open, and ended up winning the game on a throw. So I don't know that the game plan to stop Josh Allen by making him throw the ball totally worked. But that'll probably be up for debate here this week on the Twitter machine.
Oh yeah, there would be plenty of hate on Twitter, but it doesn't matter. The box score is what it is. Josh Allen was 65% completion percentage for 250 yards and a game-winning touchdown drive, and shame on him for letting the 4 turnovers happen. That I think that regardless of whether they were all directly attributable to him, they did happen, and he's in charge of the offense when those things are happening. So it's still there. But regardless, he threw for 250 yards, 65% completion, and a game-winning touchdown drive with a game-winning touchdown pass. I mean, it's hard not to take some positives away from that.
Absolutely.
Switching over to the defensive side, who was your defensive player of the game?
For me, it's Jerry Hughes. He got the big sack on 3rd down. He had a pass swat, but it was the number of times I saw him in the backfield making Darnold run, and Darnold completed some of those passes. He's a mobile enough guy where he can kind of move and still go. But I'm interested to see. I'd knock on PFF a ton, but they do a really good job with the number of pressures and things like that. I'm interested to see where Jerry Hughes stacks up this week, because I saw a lot of him being Jerry Hughes and just kind of creating havoc in the backfield for that defense. And that consistency from him, he doesn't get enough credit around the league.
I agree completely. I think that Jerry's a great call. I'm going to give some love to Jordan Poyer. You pointed him out earlier. 9 tackles, a sack, a tackle for a loss, another quarterback hit, several positive plays in the defensive backfield. And you could see him with a lot of the communication, making the calls with the linebackers back and forth there. So I really thought that it was a positive game overall on defense. I thought that, several guys deserved some attention. I thought Saran Neal looked great on special teams. But the combination of both Jordan Poyer and Jerry Hughes, I thought were fantastic. So
yeah, actually, maybe Leslie Frazier would be my also runner-up for defensive player of the game. It was a good game plan, and like we talked about, they were able to adapt to what the Jets were doing and sniff out. They were never a step behind Adam Gase and the Jets, and that's really hard to do. They talked about it a lot this week when you have a guy like Le'Veon Bell that you just haven't seen much of, and Adam Gase coming in, and you have tape on him from Miami, but he might be game planning entirely differently with a new set of players. So hard when you have all those circumstances going into a game to make a game plan, but they had it and they stayed a step ahead of them the whole time.
Absolutely. So it was exciting to see that it came together. It was terrifying at the beginning. It was a really frustrating situation to know that they weren't playing as bad as what everything was shaking out as from a turnover differential and what the score was. But the fact that they stayed focused, came back and earned an awesome comeback win, down 16 points with a 4 turnover differential, and you come back and win
on the road division game.
Yeah, I mean, I joked about it in the Minnesota game, the 4th preseason game, that you can't tell me those things don't matter. But at some point, those things do start to add up when you have a team that believes in themselves, that has that focus to remain tied in and zoned in on the game and doesn't let negative things take away from what the overall goal is. I think that really starts to matter, and that I'm curious to see where that ends up shaking out for this season. But the fact that they got a comeback win here in the first game on the road in a divisional opponent, that you can't take that away, I think that's really exciting. And I certainly am encouraged that they got a win that you can argue whether they deserved it or not. You can argue if they should have been able to do anything else from it, but certainly an exciting thing to be able to see that kind of focus and attention to detail to stay in the game and come back and earn a victory here.
Yeah, and at the end of the year, it only matters how you got the wins. Nobody's going to go back, or that you got the win, not how you got them. Nobody's going to go back and say, well, that was too close, it doesn't count. At the end of the year, that's all that matters. And a division game matters extra. To be able to pull away a division win right out of the gate is huge. And the game, like you said, it had its ups and downs. I think the best part of it for me was somewhere in the middle of the 3rd quarter, I was just thinking about all the different ways I was going to defend the Bills on Twitter in this game, because you're right, it was sloppy and to the maybe the person that didn't watch it and just saw the clips on SportsCenter or the box score, they would come in and tell me how bad the Bills were. But there was a lot of defense against that in an argument, because it wasn't as sloppy as it looked, guys. And I really feel positive moving forward that we're not going to see a lot of games that sloppy this year. It seemed like a really fluky thing. Hopefully they correct it and don't have a fluky year like that, because those things can start to pile up. You start to just think about it, and you maybe think about not turning the ball over too much, and then you start to create turnovers. So hopefully that's all behind them. They got it out of their system, and we can just chalk it up to a sloppy, weird week 1 game.
Absolutely. I think that it's something that I'm fine kind of taking a shower, washing that off of me. And tomorrow when I wake up, they're still 1-0 in the box score. And that you can't take that away regardless of how ugly the game was. The Bills won the game and they opened up 1-0, and I'm going to take it.
Suck it, New Jersey.
Aaron, tell the people where they can find you, and for all the people who are about to argue with you on the Twitter machine, where can they do that from?
Yeah, you can find me here twice a week now. We're back every Wednesday and Sunday after the game, so make sure that you are fully subscribed wherever it is that you like to see us. But then you can find me at Aaron Quinn 716 all over Twitter. You're probably not going to find me much the rest of the day. I'm going to go watch the Giants and get a head start on what they look like this year, because we got them coming right up, and spend some time with my wife, who kept my 2 children at an arm's length distance from me all day while I watched that game and just paced my house. So that's where you can find me.
Absolutely. You come and find me at Greg Thompsett, GregTompsett. Love to have a lot of fun with Bills fans. I stayed off of Twitter during the game. I think I posted one tweet right when they were kicked the field goal and said, come and give me this win that we don't deserve. And it ended up coming to fruition. So I'll take that, and, come and have a good time with us. We'll really enjoy it. We'll see you guys on Wednesday. Thanks for listening to Cover One. We are out.